Welcome to the program, everyone. Really pleased today to have Mr. Kevin Dixon from the UK. Kevin is the CEO of and founder of Boxxstep, which is a SaaS-based sales platform for B2B sellers. And Kevin's got a long history as a senior sales leader in the UK and across Europe in a lot of big companies and a lot of small companies and a lot of deep experience. So Kevin, really welcome you to the program.
Absolutely delighted, Steve. Thanks for having me. And I must say, I'm glad we're doing it at the beginning of our day before the England-Australia cricket match later on today.
Oh yeah, that could be really
obviously
sad
one of us
later. Yes. When that
exactly. So at the moment,
the
neither knows who's going to win, so we're still on speaking terms.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to that match. All right, Kevin. So one area I wanted to talk about with you was this this area of buyer enablement, and you and I have talked about this before. It wasn't a term I was that familiar with, and maybe a lot of the listeners aren't so familiar with buyer enablement. So can we dive in there? Could you start off by telling us a bit about what that is?
Sure. Yeah, it's a term that's coming up more and more now. And as soon as sort of Gartner entered the frame, it sort of adds some credibility to it. And then the likes of the Foresters and I think they're actually using it. I think they call it revenue enablement. But buyer enablement, it's actually, everyone, all of the listeners probably heard of sales enablement. It's been around for a bunch of years now. Lots of companies heavily investing in it. And buyer enablement isn't an alternative. Sales enablement is very sort of inwardly focused, and buyer enablement is a sort of subset. It's not an alternative. And it's really about trying to look at things and help buyers to buy by being more buyer-centric rather than rigid around sales processes. So it almost sounds being counterintuitive, saying, look, start thinking about it from the buyer's perspective and helping them to buy, rather than being the stereotypical sales approach where it's product, service, and solution differentiation. So, you know, if you really wanted to take, I suppose, to condense it down into its simplest form, it's two things. It's firstly, information. You know, we bombard buyers with information. And it's almost like, here's this buffet of information, everything that I can give you about my product or service, pick the bones out of that, find a few golden nuggets, and 2/3 of it's not read. So the first part is about helping them, provide them with the right content to the right people at the right time. And what do I mean by that? They're not interested in the big picture. They're interested in the job or task at hand. And what they want is information that helps them complete that job or task at hand. So focusing the right content at the right time. And the second part is about being smart enough, knowledgeable enough, the right business acumen to sort of offer some different perspectives and considerations that adds value to them. Really, hopefully that describes it well. Information and different perspectives.
All right, so there's a few areas we've got to dig into there. Could you start off, could you give us a simple example of buyer enablement in action so we recognize that activity?
Yeah, well, if you look, once again, put ourselves into the situation of a buyer. And the buyer, by the way, buyer isn't procurement, it's not purchasing, it's anybody who's in the team that is evaluating or making a decision based on a project. So it could be across all sorts of departments, anybody that's in the buyer. And you see lots of different situations is that all of this information, and you're competing with a bunch of other companies to win the deal. And the challenge to start with is the amount of time that sellers get with buyers is pretty limited. I think the research shows that a typical deal, only 17% of the buying process is spent with sales. So you can see there why you're not always going to have these face-to-face, and therefore it's all about saying, what can you give them that helps them and positions you as somebody that's sort of coaching, helping, advising them. Now, it isn't about brochures. It isn't about stuff that's sort of just all about me, which is the typical sales guy. You know, what they want is somebody that helps them. And the old adage that people buy from people, then it was people buy from people that they they know and trust. And now I think it's people buy from people that help them. And help them means that they've got this task in hand. And a typical example, going back to your question, is that you give them something, and that could be, some research paper. It could be an ROI calculator. It could be a diagnostic tool. And what do I mean by tool? Something where they can type in some problem and it gives them some recommendations across an industry that is relatively independent. It could be some case studies. Okay, that's going to favor you because it's a case study about what you've done, but it shows you've got the experience thing. So, there's lots of different examples. And the thing about the buying process in a company is they're never the same. They're not linear like our so-called sales processes. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. The key to any good buyer enablement strategy is really understanding who you're trying to sell to start with.
Yeah, okay. So understanding that, is this where we're getting into, mapping our customer's journey first, understanding where they're getting their information, and then, or is that a separate thing?
Well, no, look, it is. Of course, it's part and parcel of it. So, I always say, one of the things I always say is that B2B selling today is like building a jigsaw puzzle. Without all the pieces in place, you can't complete it. So if you look at now that the typical buyer group is now much larger. I think the last research that came out said it typically around 6 to 10 people are involved in the process. Often it's more. The larger, more enterprise deals could be 10 to 20. And each one of those people has got a personal agenda, certain criteria, certain concerns, KPIs they're going to be measured on. So, of course, they have something that's important to them. So understanding all of the different people within the buyer's team, what's important to them, and what role they play in the decision, because then you can start to piece it together. And typically, here's the funny thing about it. Everyone seems to think there's this buying process. If what you sell is a complex solution, then it's likely they don't have an internal process for it because it's something they buy once every 5 or 10 years. They are more than likely going to seek advice and guidance from you about how you've worked with companies similar to them to get these decisions through. And when I say decisions through, something else you and I discussed before, half of all deals that are forecasted, they end up as no decision outcomes. And that's because the buying process fails. The buyer team didn't reach consensus.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's a good point. Yeah, when someone's buying a complex product or a complex solution, it's not something they do often. And, I think sellers underestimate the value they can bring into that process, to help the buyer build the business case, to help them with the roadblocks that they're going to run into internally that they'll need to forecast and overcome, right? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah, look, I mean, the way that I always look at it is say, as salespeople, look at some of the deals that you've won, the deals you got done.
Yep.
Then start to think about how people were involved from the buying side. What types and roles were involved? What were the typical objections that they got raised? When the internal champion that you've hopefully got meets with senior execs, what kickback was there? When this champion meets with the internal users, what types of questions are there? And then try and offer some sort of prescriptive advice and give practical support that helps them overcome their own similar internal hurdles.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm working with a client at the moment who been selling a pretty straightforward product for a long time. But now they're transforming that product into a service model, like a usage model, if you like. So they're gone from selling, a pretty straightforward solution now into selling a service. And it's going to involve a lot of different stakeholders. And it's something that this client's looking at. Okay, we've got to sell differently. We've got to understand now, maybe we've got to talk to CFOs that we haven't talked to before about the cash flow implications of this. And You know, it's different for the IT manager now taking this model. It gives him more flexibility and it's going to address some of his different challenges. Whereas before it was very much a straightforward product, price, feature shootout against competition. So I think what you're talking about would really fit in with what this client of mine's doing. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean, what you mentioned there, Steve, is something that we're seeing more and more now, is that the way that we're having to sell into the companies that we previously sold to is changing. And I don't believe that a lot of salespeople are doing it particularly well. And there was another stat that said 80% of salespeople do not identify and engage with everybody in the buyer team. And that's a really, really dangerous strategy, because I think often we're humans. We find someone of reasonable importance. They like us, they like what we do, and we think we're 3/4 of the way there. We think we'll enjoy the ride. We'll keep feeding this person or these couple of people.
Yes.
And then boom, they don't win the deal. They don't win the deal because there's a parallel activity going on with another stakeholder who's engaging with different vendors. And you haven't got, I mean, the trick nowadays is to go wider and deeper. Never ignore anybody. You know, users, they say now that the influencers are more powerful than the decision makers, because the decision makers don't want to make decisions that they're going to be accountable for if they haven't got buy-in from all of the teams.
Yeah, I agree.
Stat as well.
Decision makers, the old single decision maker that we used to look for. Remember those old sales account planning systems, like Find the Fox or Find the Decision Maker and this sort of thing. They're just so elusive now, and no senior exec wants to. Oh, they've got so many restrictions on them that they're audited to death. Their decisions are checked. Like there's so many interested parties. You're not going to. You do have to go much wider now and satisfy a lot more folks. So I definitely relate to that.
Yeah, 58% of decisions are made outside of the C-suite. And we, like you said, we were naturally trained to go high, to get into the decision makers, the C-suite.
Yep.
And with a view that, you know, that person would then enforce their decision downwards. And that was how my career was in the early days. Someone would be accountable. You meet with them, you pitch, propose, hopefully close. They tell everyone what the decision was, job done. Doesn't happen that way. The lone wolf sales guy that works on his own now is also a non-existent thing. So it's a team-based thing by the buyer, and it's a team-based thing by the seller. And the more people you involve, that's why we call it complex. It's complex now because the more people involved is the more complexity. So it's us that are complex. And another thing as well, the more people involved, the higher the percentage of a no decision outcome. And because it's like trying to get everybody to agree, be on the same wavelength. That's a real challenge today. Yeah.
So if we don't, embrace this, buyer enablement philosophy, what are the results going to be if we're not in tune with this?
Well, it's a good question because, and it's one I think is one of the most important ones. What's the consequences of ignoring it? Well, if you're still going to bang the product or service differentiation drum, they've tuned out. Buyers have tuned out from that because that doesn't really help them. I love research because it sort of enforces opinions and it adds credibility to opinions. But they say that Gartner said that I think it was 2/3 of buyers are more than likely to buy from a company with a good buying experience. So buyer enablement is what contributes towards a good buyer experience. Helping is the core of buyer enablement. Helping them to buy by providing the right things at the right time to the right people, giving different perspectives and consideration, adding acumen and value. If you don't do it, it's the old adage, keep doing what you're doing and expecting different results is the first sign of insanity.
Yes.
But if you start thinking, okay, how can I differentiate? Because it's very difficult to be unique or differentiate in product or service nowadays. What you're good at against competitors on one thing, they're better in another thing. And you can imagine then the buyers say, well, what do we choose? Who do we choose? So buyer enablement it's different. So it's no longer about, they don't really give a toss about your product or service. They give a toss about solving their business problem or completing their job and task at hand. And everything you do should revolve around that.
No, absolutely agree. And you can throw a blanket over all the competitors. They're all pretty much of a muchness. It's very hard for customers to really discern or even remember the small points of differentiation, right? So that we can't hang our hat on our solution being better to be consistently successful. So totally understand that. So if a sales leader or organizations, looking at this, thinking this, wow, we've got to get on this buyer enablement train, where do they start? What are some of the components they need to be looking at to make this happen?
In my view, buyer enablement is a combination of sales and marketing working together. So the sales leaders, it's a difficult one. I sometimes get shot down for saying this, but I have a view that most salespeople don't know what they need to know about their prospects, and most sales leaders don't know that they don't know because everyone's so focused on the numbers. So if you're a sales leader, start making sure that your salespeople fully understand the full breadth of the buyer team, really understanding who's who, what role they're playing, what's important to each of them, the internal dynamics between them, the winners and losers involved in change management, because that's inevitable, any politics. So this is nothing new. We've talked about this for many years in sales, but most people haven't done it because they want to get from A to B as quick as possible. But the second part, and this is where marketing comes in, is we've got to start creating more content designed to help people to buy rather than helping salespeople to sell. So think about all of the different jobs and tasks that people involved in making a decision for what you sell, and then start to make sure you create content that helps them. So, and use it in a bunch of different ways. Social media, I think 85% of buyers use it as part of their buying process. So when you're posting information as a company, post something that helps people in their buying process. Blog posts, email campaigns, case studies, white papers, all of them should be about understanding their business problems and the process of them making that decision. Yes. So twofold. Sales leaders, get your salespeople doing and knowing more, and marketing department start producing content that enables people to buy rather than sellers to sell.
Oh, sounds simple. Let's go through those a little bit, because we all know it's not that simple, and not many folks doing really nailing this yet. So on the sales side, are you talking about account planning? Is that really like a different take on account planning, a deeper, maybe doing fewer opportunities, but getting deeper into those? Or
look, I mean, when it's more opportunity planning, because account planning,
opportunity management. Okay, sure.
The account planning tends to be the big umbrella, the big strategy, the big objectives, the who's who mapping. But the first thing to do is win the task at hand. The task at hand is the opportunity, whatever the value might be. And so it is really about looking at that opportunity and saying, okay, what's the business problem these people are truly trying to solve? Because, the old adage of no problem, no prospect is pretty much true. They're only going to spend money if it's going to solve a business problem or achieve a business goal. So really digging in to understand that business problem, then all the things we're taught in sales training that everybody goes, that was great, and then we walk away from 2 weeks later. The motive, the urgency, the returns, the needs, the consequences of doing nothing. Because the more you understand this, the better equipped you are to help them. If you have limited information, then you're shooting in the dark. So it is just about understanding who you're trying to sell to, and how you can help them. And you can only help them if it's like a doctor. If you can't, you've got to diagnose the problem before you give them the remedy. And you need lots of information. And most salespeople, they want to bypass that. They go into sort of broadcast mode. rarely, and I see it time and time again. I speak to sales leaders all the time, and they talk about actually now they're looking at it, now they're taking a breath and starting to look at what their sales guys know. It's clear they don't know enough people, and they don't know enough about those people and what's important to them.
Yeah. So absolutely. So first, I guess sales leaders need to be aware, salespeople need to be aware that these changes are going on with the buyer. The buyer's changed how they buy. There's a lot more people involved. So you need to be looking for those signs. So if your sales rep's coming back saying, yeah, I've got this one great contact on a £1 million, $1 million deal, we should really be, double clicking on that and pressing, who else is going to be involved, right? Because we see that all the time.
Every bit of advice I give to people, everything I'm talking about is through personal experience, personal failure. You learn these things, and I learn them the hard way, but I don't repeat the same mistakes. We've all salespeople have some luck, good and bad luck. And now you can start to, don't rely on luck. Start to sort of swing the pendulum in your favor. Start to position yourself with a buyer where they see you as not being the stereotypical sales guy that's just trying to ram a square peg into a round hole just to win the deal.
Yes.
The more you understand the prospect, the quicker you can qualify them in or out.
Sure.
That's the great starting point. And then once you qualify them in, the more you know, the better positioned you are to beat your competitors, because you're coming at it from their perspective, the buyers, rather than, okay, it's all about us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that no problem, no prospect. So true. Now, the sales part, that's in our sales leaders' control, our salespeople's control. And we can probably, do a lot better there. But you mentioned the marketing side, and this is like a sort of an ongoing discussion and challenge, is how sales and marketing work together. And I see a lot of marketing functions getting their direction almost in a silo in some ways. Separate from sales. Some are very good and very integrated, but a lot of companies very hardwired just to sort of top down, be just feeding the sales team with product information and product data and information on our company and our capabilities. But you're talking about, we need marketing to be in sync with this buyer enablement and be talking in terms of customers' problems and how we solving customers' problems and things like that, right?
Absolutely. Once again, Steve, you raised a good point. There's sort of, we've got an us and them between the sellers and buyers, and in some companies we've got an us and them between sales and marketing.
Right.
They're not necessarily aligned. Marketing traditionally, they were very focused on brand, pretty stuff, look great, imagery, and now they're becoming more and more accountable. They're being measured. Historically, it wasn't measured pretty extensively. Now it's more and more measured, and the smart marketeers are starting to say, well, hold on, what do we try and do to help people to buy? What do we try and do to sort of differentiate us from the competition? So I think it's 2 weeks' time. I was quite intrigued by this, but I've been invited to a buyer enablement marketing event in London. And it's the first one I've seen of this. So it's, where marketing. So I'm going to be intrigued to see what they actually say. Whether or not they're really going to nail it, I don't know. But, it might end up being a bit fluffy. And sorry to any marketers that listen. To be fair, I've had responsibility for sales and marketing. So, I've got part of a foot in that camp anyway. So I'm critical of my own type as well. But yeah, it's the goal that everyone, sales and marketing, are striving to achieve is better sales results. And stop thinking about what you think someone wants in terms of content, and start understanding what they really want. What they really want is people to help them, because in this world of information, they are suffering from analysis paralysis. They've got so much information. Yep. So just to throw a few more stats in there, I think in the buying process, a best part of half of the sales process is where all the different contacts in the buyer team independently research, and then they come together, and I think they spend about 15% of the buying process, deconflicting all of the
Right.
information that each one has gathered. Deconflicting. How much of a waste of time is that? So, for smart marketers, you can actually make information that they haven't got to work hard to understand the value in. They can see, they say, well, here's marketeers and salespeople that truly understand the challenges we face, truly understand the business problem that we're trying to solve. And they've created everything in a beautiful way that helps us complete the jobs and tasks at hand. Because it's one step at a time. The old, you don't get slam dunks in sales anymore. It's a series of processes you go for before ultimately, hopefully, you win a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great, Kevin. And I totally agree with that. I think you make some really good points. Customers are being overloaded with information, and we can be a little bit put off by that. They're like the 57% statistic where that's customers research on their own before they engage with sales and everything else. But let's not overestimate, like you said earlier, how good buyers are at deciphering that information and actually running a purchasing process for a complex solution. We have a lot of value to bring, and if we bring it in the right way and, like you say, focus on their problem and get away from our own sales process, like most sales organizations still very focused on their weekly, monthly, quarterly number and driving customers to close in that cycle. We need to be very much more in tune with buyer enablement. So I think it's a really great topic.
One last point then. I was talking to a guy called Steve Thompson. Steve Thompson's a sales author, sales expert based in Atlanta in the States. And he said to me the other day, he said, Kevin, he said, buyers are in the business of their business. They're not in the business of buying. They do the buying to support their business. They need help with the buying. And currently, the typical way salespeople do it doesn't help them. It adds to the complication. So buyer enablement is about making it easier for them.
That's great. We'll finish on that note, Kevin. Really appreciate the discussion on buyer enablement today, and encourage everyone to check out what Kevin's doing on LinkedIn and check out Boxxstep. So Kevin, once again, thanks for coming along, and look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Absolutely great, Steve. Really enjoyed it, mate. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining, and we'll talk to you soon again. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.